What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I am excited to have Whitney and Yasemin, and they have Whitman Emorson.com and GemsForAll.com. And before I introduce both of you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. This is really an interesting story because it is a lot of amazing companies are birthed out of an agency. And so we will talk about their agency. We'll talk about their other company, Jems, which was birthed out of the agency. So some interesting interviews from the product side. So there's a lot of agency interviews. There's a bunch of e-commerce interviews. I had Daniel from Regrain Bars. They were actually going to different breweries, taking the spent grain, which the bars and breweries were throwing out anyways, and they would make nutritional bars out of them. So that's a really cool story in a lot of respects. And on the bar front, one of the founders of RX Bars I had on the podcast, and he talked about starting from his kitchen, and they ended up selling for Kellogg, I think for $600 million. So it's a pretty interesting story. And then I had one of the founders of Quest Nutrition who and talked about his journey. And then on the agency front, there's been a number of them. Kevin Hurrigan from Spinutech, he's had an agency since 1995. So he talked about that kind of the evolution of his business and the space in general. And Duncan Elney is kind of an interesting one too, of Firebelly Marketing. They have a great podcast where they help food and beverage companies with social. And so check those out, many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And at Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships. How do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. Whitney and Yasemin, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the hosts so they can create great content and amazing relationships and just focus on running their business. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com to learn more. So I'm excited to introduce Whitman Emorson. They were founded by Whitney and Yasemin, longtime friends, creative collaborators, and they founded it in New York in 2011. And they're entrepreneurial self-starters. They were driven by the idea that design should support a multiplicity of voices and set out to create a studio to pursue projects of value. And their desire to produce good work and create meaning in the world kind of underpins the studio's approach and their collaborative culture, which we'll talk about. And in 2021, they launched, out of all things, the safer sex brand, Jems. I was going to say some dumb dad joke. It was birthed out of Jems, but they weren't using Jems at the time of the birth because Jems, anyways, Jems is my daughters hate my dad jokes. Jems is a female-founded, body-safe condom and lube. It actually has ditched toxic stereotypes, harmful ingredients, in an effort to change the way young folks feel about safer sex and how condoms are seen and sold. Thank you both for joining me.
We're happy to be here.
For having us.
It's such an interesting story because a lot of cool companies are birthed out of agencies, and including like MailChimp. I know there's a bunch of others. So we'll talk about how that came about. But just for a second, talk about Whitman Emorson for a second and what you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Whitman Emorson really started, Yasemin and I know each other from undergraduate degrees at McGill. And we both did traditional political science, international development. So when we ended up in master's programs in design and then working in design, there wasn't a lot of people that we knew from our backgrounds that ended up in design. So I was working for a company called Bruce Mau Design, and they do a lot of strategic work, really interesting work for companies from everything from branding, but really helping the way that they look and shape the values and institutional knowledge of a company, everything. Yasemin was working for Martha Stewart at the time in the books division. And we started taking on some side pro bono projects. And what we found was that we just had a different way of approaching these projects, whether it was from sort of our more traditional academic background, whether it was the fact that we were females, because back in 2011, there wasn't a lot of female-led design studios. And whatever that was, we felt like we had something different and a different way to go about design. And that was when we started talking about more seriously doing projects, and we launched our studio, Whitman Emorson. The name is always a funny one people ask about. It's obviously a bit of my first name, a bit of Yasmin's last name. And we loved the fact that it sounded like a law firm. It was sort of a pseudonym,
It does
a male
sound very
pseudonym.
official.
Yeah. And I mean, it was really to do with this idea too, that we thought design could take you anywhere. So we never wanted to be something with the word design. Like, we never knew what we were going to do, but it's kind of the reason why Jems isn't actually that far from what we had initially conceived of back in 2011.
Yasmin, talk about maybe the first milestone from a client perspective for Whitman Emorson.
Absolutely. I think for us, we were literally just the two of us from the beginning, and we shared a desk, and that's how we started working. And so we had to really garner trust with our clients, and that often meant starting out really small. And so there's a real estate company, Toronto-based, that we started working with, and we started with their financial reports, which was a pretty small project that we took on, but it was also, we're excited to nerd out on making a financial report look visually exciting. And we poured our heart and soul into it. And it ended up garnering a lot of trust within the company. And they started understanding how we approach design, what our intention was to do. And, something as simple as a financial report, how do you make it communicate beyond what it is, which is just financial tables? How do you allow it to speak to the company, its values, and what it's trying to do beyond the bottom line? And that allowed us to build a really strong strategic relationship with this company, to the point where we've been, agency of record for the last over 10 years. And there's very little that, the company will put out without us touching it. And so that felt like a real milestone to sort of grow with a client in that way. And that's sort of our ideal working model with clients to this day.
What did you learn from working with Martha Stewart Company?
Actually, so much. I really enjoyed my time there. I found the group of people working at that company when I was there were so multifaceted, so talented. And it also, for our studio, we loved the idea of bringing in, we always call them unicorns, because we didn't want, people who were siloed, somebody who was just a designer, somebody who was just a copywriter, somebody who was just an account manager. You spoke to it, this idea of collaboration was so important to us. And we were a small and nimble company. And so the idea was, you come with ready to wear a lot of hats and to contribute. And if you have an idea, if you're an account manager and you have an idea for creating a product, we're all ears. That was very much the spirit of Martha Stewart as well. I just found it was a place where there was an abundance of creative thinking, and no one was ever siloed, or, that you were able, it was a place to share ideas and to let creativity sort of grow and grow. And, I think for me, I've just always been so inspired by Martha Stewart's ability to launch an incredibly successful career, over the age of 50. And so, even Whitney and I are technically older founders when it comes to Jems. We're often at founders events with founders that are much younger than us. But I think there's really something to a second life and creating a company once you're building off of a previous career. And that's sort of what I draw from Martha Stewart as well.
Whitney, on the agency side, what has worked? You have your first client is in real estate. What's worked over the years to get more clients from the agency side?
I mean, certainly to this day, referral is the number one way that we get clients. We have always, from the beginning, we said we have to do everything the best, whether it be an email comes in, just respond right away. When you're writing an email, always don't have spelling errors. When you have deadlines, we've always set timelines. So even just sort of the administrative stuff. And then on the design end, we've always worked from this place of just think that it's the first time it's ever happened. So don't think about how you have to do it. Think about what you could do it. So clients would come to us with a budget, or they would say, we have this thing and with this magazine and we're spending X on it. It's a promotional thing. And we would think, I wonder if I had those X dollars, if we did this, would that be something, nobody's ever done in this industry before, but would it garner you different eyes, different attention? And so we've always been able to be sort of just really nimble and thoughtful. We think of design as a toolbox, which is just a way to use different ideas. And I think that's been really successful for us. And I think that is essentially what ends up referring us from client to client.
What about, the hiring process? What does that look like? Because obviously culture is important, the collaboration is important, and also you've put a leadership team and a team in place so that you can actually focus and work on Jems Condoms too. So what does the hiring process look like?
It's a really good question, and it's so important to us. So being a small team, when we are hiring, I would say more than 50% of what we're looking for is a general fit in terms of culture. There's certainly a type of personality that thrives in our studio, and it's, a self-starter, somebody that's willing to take risks and initiate ideas on their own without too much, coaching. But ultimately, when we create a safe environment for creativity, and that, of course, is that culture piece of, welcoming ideas, being open to collaborating and sharing ideas. That's really what we want to make sure is never damaged with new hires. And so truly, that's what ends up getting, I think, we make sure all team members get a sense of a potential hire and whether or not there's a fit there, because we really want to keep the dynamic that we have in studio intact.
I think also
Go
too.
ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, I think we wanted to build a studio where we wanted to work. So I think even from the early days when sort of mental health and life balance wasn't really such a topic of conversation, it was really a focus for us. We really believed people couldn't be creative if they were grinding all hours of the day at work. We wanted people to travel. We wanted people to see their families. We wanted it to be a place that we could raise our kids and work and that be harmonious.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second. What did you infuse that attracted the talent, but allowed, people to have a great place to work? For instance, I'm looking at your the bio page here, and let's take Hannah, for example. I mean, she's worked at Netflix, or worked with collaborated with brands like Netflix, FIFA, Gallo Wines, Procter and Gamble. So these people are very experienced, and they could probably work at a lot of places. So what were the things that you infused in, like you were saying, some examples that allowed you to attract that top talent?
Yeah, in Hannah's case, it's actually an interesting case. So Hannah joined our team when she was recently graduated from university, and I think we worked with her closely in a new area. She was on the account management side, and she sort of cut her teeth at Whitman Emorson. She did end up moving to another company, getting, as you just mentioned, some really great experience with some, incredible clients. And I think ended up back at Whitman Emorson because a few things. One, I think we were able to...
So she went somewhere and then came back.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so I think what we could offer to Hannah was opportunity to grow and evolve. And we see Hannah playing a very large role in the company she already has she's our business director, but we see her growing with the company over time. So she's able to assume new leadership position, but also I think she's able to, she's recently married. Has a dog. She's able to kind of grow in that part of her life in our studio in a really safe and positive way as well. And that's, again, like Whitney said, that's just what we've always wanted to offer to our teammates, because that's what we were looking for as well as we kind of evolved as humans.
You don't have to share the intimate details here, but I'm curious, coming back, right? So obviously you have an environment where you've left the door open, right? But even with the door open, I don't know what it is. People, there's a pride thing. Maybe it's awkward to come back. How did that conversation go or start with, hey, I may want to come back here? Because obviously someone leaves and, there's just, it could be awkward. I don't know.
Totally. And the truth is, it was a case of Whitney and I in the background, we said, it would be so great if Hannah came back. But we were a little too shy to send that email. And what ended up happening is she emailed us because she accidentally sent a package to our studio. She emailed saying, hey, this is so funny, but I sent a package to the studio. Any chance you've seen it? And so that opened up the opportunity to sort of say, hey, how are you? What's going on? How are you doing? We miss you. We think about you often. And one thing led to another, and we were able to connect and talk about the possibility of working together again. So it was a bit serendipitous that way too, but I also believe it was one of those, the universe made it happen for us.
I also think, especially pre-pandemic, we have this beautiful, 25-foot ceiling loft in downtown Toronto on the West End. And we used to host these massive parties. And we would always invite everybody that's sort of worked for Whitman Emorson, friends of Whitman Emorson. It wasn't a client event. It was just a event to have fun with former employees and friends and things like that. And I think we embrace change. We think, people should feel like if they want to move on, we want to be supportive of that. We're the first people to step up and say, okay, we'll help you in your next job. You want to transition to this other kind of a role. And we always make it a safe place to leave or come back. We have people that stay a really long time, and we have many clients that we've had for over 10 years too. But at the same time, change is a part of life. And I think being supportive of that is important as well.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the transition to focusing more time on Jems, but just first putting a leadership team in place. What are some of the things you did so you have the opportunity to focus time and energy on a project you're passionate about?
I think we searched for team members that were at a place in their career where they were able to, have a lot of autonomy in their workplace and were craving that autonomy, but weren't necessarily or in the place of or don't necessarily want to have their own studio. And so I think the way we positioned it to everyone was, I think it's rare to have a smaller team and two leaders say, we're truly going to give you autonomy, and for them to follow through on that promise. And I think what we did was say, because of Jems, there's only so much time and energy we can devote to Whitman Emorson at this stage. And so we're looking for somebody to run this as though it's their own studio, but we're taking care of the admin side of things, the legal side of things, the accounting, all the things that can be stumbling blocks when you are starting your own business that we now sort of are pretty comfortable and familiar with. We're taking that off your plate. We're also here to support you when there are those sticky moments, or if there's, we're here to celebrate the wins and sort of ride through the difficult moments. And so I think it is a unique opportunity because, as Whitney and I have been there, we've done it all just the two of us, and to have the support, but to have the autonomy at the same time is a pretty unique offering.
I'm curious, maybe cadence of meetings internally with the team. It could be with you and team or just themselves, because from a management perspective, what does that look like?
The team always does a meeting on Monday morning. That's just like a regroup. It almost ends up being people talking about their weekends, but it's important just to kind of again, for almost a cultural piece, and then a little bit about what's happening in the week. And then Tuesday, there's an in-person meeting where everybody gets together and kind of goes over the whole status of all the projects. And we've toiled over the years whether the whole studio needs to be present for all the little details, but it actually does, because then people know what's going on. They're able to pitch in where needed. And it helps for us to be sort of like the whole studio is really a part of everything. If somebody has an idea, they can throw it out there. That sort of thing. And then there's the management team, which also has a weekly meeting. That's the leadership team. There's a resourcing team where they will meet and talk about, who needs to be on what for the week. And Yasemin and I have a lot of independent meetings so we'll meet with Hannah to talk about new business stuff. We'll meet with Jackie, who's running the studio creatively, to talk about what's happening there. We'll meet with Emily, who's our finance director, to talk about what's happening on that level. And then we meet with the leadership team as a whole and join status meetings from time to time.
I'm curious how you transitioned your time as Jems got bigger and you had more responsibilities.
I think luckily we were able to, when we launched Jems, it was, we launched a website and we had product in hand, but it takes a long time to build relationships with retail partners. And so I think there was a transition period where we were still doing a lot on the Whitman Emorson side, but getting Jems off the ground. And then once the leadership team was sort of running smoothly and operating really well together, I think we were able to ramp up with Jems, which was perfect because I think it was the time to put more time and energy into marketing, PR, operations, all those sides of it.
Well, and truly, when we launched Jems, the idea, it was the depths of the pandemic. Yasemin and I had just had another baby. We thought we've never really been a big fan at Whitman Emorson of awards, because it's anybody that knows in this world knows it means you spend a ton of money entering them, you spend a ton of time doing it, and it's really a race of who has the most time and money to enter the awards. So it's never really been our thing, but we thought, what if we could build something that would be a calling card for the agency? So if we could do everything from soup to nuts in terms of a brand and launch it, could we show what you can do when you've done everything right or been thoughtful about everything? So that was really the sort of genesis of the idea. And Yasemin and I have always been packaging and sort of CPG nerds. We follow all kinds of founders and brands forever, like other people would follow musicians or bands. And so for us, it was really a playful exercise. And that's how it kind of, I think, really transitioned, because it was almost something we were saying, like you asked us about what we do for new business. We don't do a lot of outreach. We get a lot of RFPs. It's all referrals. We thought, we'll build this and they will come. That was sort of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting, and if you're listening to the audio, there is a video piece, and we're on the Whitman Emorson site, and you can see, Jems, you treat Jems as a client, right? And so you can see some of the work here on the page from Jems. And so just talk about why, when I first was researching, and I'm like, oh yeah, Jems. I'm like, I think I'm reading this right. They have a condom company. Am I on the right people? Why Jems? Why a condom company?
Well, as Whitney said, we were both in between pregnancies, and she actually called me from the pharmacy and said, have you been in the condom aisle recently? This is absolutely atrocious. I don't know who this industry is speaking to, but I feel so alienated. And, we started paying attention to it. And, we knew right off the bat, if we felt alienated, there were a slew of other people who also felt alienated. We still can't really figure out who exactly is being targeted in that aisle. And fundamentally, we did more research. Unfortunately, STIs are skyrocketing at the moment. And, this isn't something I think enough people know about, but the numbers are scary and it is reaching epidemic levels. And, part of the problem is this idea that there's so much shame and stigma to going in and buying this product and using this product. And so part of the backstory of Whitman Emorson is just understanding that design can really change perception and change behavior. And so why not take that approach with something like condoms, where we can have really impact health implications or health outcomes for good. So that was, truly how the idea came about. And then we were lucky in a lot of ways, now understanding what it's like to start a CPG company. We were lucky to be able to find a top manufacturer right off the bat and we were also lucky that condoms are a really high margin item. So those were sort of two things that I would say were more luck than strategy on our end. So that's why, in addition to it being an amazing case study for Whitman Emorson, we quickly realized there's a real business here.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm sure people go at it from different angles. Some people are like, hey, what's a high margin item that we should be selling in the pharmacy section or whatever? And you're like, oh, you probably would have known pretty quickly if you try to sell it and, there's not much profit margin in there. But as it turned out, and you tackled some of those things. I'm wondering, what are some things that you found that you had to overcome, like the manufacturing? But before we talk about it, let's talk about the design for a second. Like, we're here on the page, Jems. I have to ask how you came up with this constellation. This is fun, playful, really interesting here because I'm scrolling through. Obviously, it catches the eye. Talk about the thought process of coming up with this.
So really the backstory is this idea that, the way that sex has always been pitched in the condom aisle is that you need extra stuff to make you a good performer. And it taps into that idea that nobody feels like they're enough and there's a lot of shame. And then there's this performative part where it's like, you're some Trojan riding in on a horse and, that's what's been projected, and that's terrifying. And the reality is, especially for young people, like, sex is this thing that's totally can be embarrassing and funny and awkward and silly and beautiful and a whole host of different emotions and things, and not just sort of this one linear experience. So we wanted to tap into that with the design. So we call our colors alien green and blue. They're universally almost awkward together, but for some reason they're harmonious. We called the company Jems because there's an affiliation with, a gem being a positive shimmering thing. And, it kind of mimicked almost the foil to us. And for us, it was really about just creating something that felt very playful and approachable and something that you wouldn't mind leaving on your desk and somebody seeing it and breaking down these kind of barriers. So, the constellation is just a playful way to break down some of these ideas that are sort of out of the scope of sex that's usually spoken about in this regard.
Some of the things that you had to tackle, right? You had to tackle manufacturing, right? You had to tackle, talk about distribution wise. What do you do and how did you get it out in the world to begin with?
So we joined some trade shows very early on, not really knowing what they were or how to operate them, but it did lead us to have some pretty great conversations with some great retailers. And those conversations kind of gave us this sense of product market fit, because what we understood very quickly was that retailers saw the white space in the market. This is an area of pharmacies and grocery stores that is not thriving. And there has been little innovation or change in far too long. And so those conversations with retailers sort of gave us an understanding of, what gap we're filling and the fact that there is a true need for this product. We've made a great headway in the sort of natural grocery space. We're the only condom that in Whole Foods in Canada. So that's a very natural fit for us. Our intention is very much to be found in all grocery and pharmacy stores that you would expect to find condoms, because condoms are one of those things where you kind of want to get it when you need it. And so while we, of course, have our own DTC channel, it's not necessarily our primary distribution play, because we need more convenience than that. And in fact, we're sort of exploring some more, online delivery platforms as well, because we see it as the kind of thing, if you want to get it in 15 minutes, we want you to have it in 15 minutes. So we have a real omni-channel approach. Retail is a huge part of it. And we're also doing some more unconventional retail plays. And so we see beyond sort of grocery store and pharmacies, we know we can be in retailers that our competitors can't be. And so we're really interested in exploring the beauty and wellness space. And that really plays into sort of changing the perception of condoms as well. And so is it not seen as a medical thing that you get at the pharmacy? Is it seen as a wellness product that you can grab at, a beauty retailer, and along with your lip gloss and your hand sanitizer or sunscreen, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So when you say unconventional, that's kind of where my mind goes. I have two daughters and we always want to go to Ulta or Sephora or something. So is that what you kind of consider unconventional? It's people are just going for their beauty products and it's there. Because I'm honestly, I haven't like zeroed in on everything that's there. I imagine they don't have condoms there, but maybe I'm wrong.
They don't. Yeah, no, they don't. They have, so sexual wellness is definitely a category that Ulta has been embracing lately. And so, there are steps being made. And so one of the things we're tackling a little bit is that sexual wellness is booming. It's becoming much more mainstream, and everybody seems to be excited to have lube and vibrators on shelves. But safer sex products haven't been as readily embraced. And maybe that's solely because having a Trojan on the shelf doesn't make sense. That's why we're sort of making this push with retailers where, you really need to round out this category and make sure there's some products here that are, allowing folks to have safer sex and not just focusing on the lube and vibrators as part of the mix.
It's a really funny thing, though, because everybody assumes it was one of the things I assumed when we got into the condom game was, knowing that the government in the 90s spent millions and millions of dollars trying to promote condom use to tackle the AIDS epidemic, knowing that we're actually at the highest level of STIs in history right now. We would have thought there would be massive platforms to be able to talk about getting condoms out there. And it's really been the opposite. We've been censored and shadow banned on about any platform you can imagine. And similarly, there's a lot of retailers too have problems. They won't take condoms out of the specific aisle. There's certain rules that you're not allowed to do because they're condoms. Everybody's very worried about the idea of promoting condoms, sort of that age-old thing of promote condoms thinks you're promoting sex, where obviously the research all points to the opposite now.
I'm not walking through like, I need Tic Tacs. Oh, here's condoms. I need those. I mean, it's
exactly
crazy when you think about it. Yeah.
So that's been a really interesting thing for us.
I want to talk about mentorship for a second. It can be mentorship in the agency, but specifically, when people are entering into a new space, they seek out industry experts. And one of the things you did, talk about your decision to do the accelerator.
So we certainly are in the category of, we feel like we are experts at certain things. We know what we know. We always know that we can learn more. And we are also always wanting to talk to people. So we have an amazing network of founders that we speak to, actually a lot of female founders, but founders in general. And we're constantly, at least once or twice a week, talking to different founders on their experience. And we find that incredibly valuable. We had been a part of this forum program in Vancouver that helps women entrepreneurs. And that had been helpful for us in terms of letting us know what the role of a founder was, because this is very new to us, very different than the agency side. I think what we were looking for now was more kind of advice, connections on about fundraising and how you accelerate your business in that way. So we've joined to be a part of Dream Ventures, which is incredible. And it's led by Annie Evans and Kelly Arena. And they're both in the VC world, and they have so much knowledge, and they're mission really is to share that with other female entrepreneurs. You know, believe it was only 0.6% of venture dollars this year went to female founders. So the idea is with more education, more connections that, you know, you can impact that. And so far it's been amazing and we're really excited about it.
Where is it?
It's based in New York.
So do you have to go, how does the program work? Do you have to actually go there and live for a while, or?
As much as our families would absolutely love that. No, we're actually going tomorrow for an event. We're actually going to go for the night, unfortunately. But, and then there's an event at the end in March that's in person, but otherwise the rest is conducted over Zoom, which makes it.
The opportunity for us is also to nurture a more of a US based network as well. So, you know, Canada and the US, we're seeing certain differences, both in terms of how retailers embrace our product, but I think also how investors embrace our product. US is just more open and more understanding, I think, at times of certain types of investments as well as certain type of CPG products. And so that's really part of the drive of why we wanted to connect directly with the Dream Ventures.
And the evolution of, you say, I know with the agency, you bootstrapped it. Talk about the evolution of bootstrap versus raising money with Jems.
Yeah, so because we had Whitman Emorson as a launching pad for Jems, we were able to bootstrap. We treated it very much like a client, as you said. And so we just allocated resources and time in studio to put toward it. I think once we decided that this was going beyond the idea of a calling card project and it was moving into a real business, we raised a small friends and family round that helped us to take on certain things. We did a little bit of PR work. We did a much more robust marketing push. And it gave us we were able to push ahead with some of those initiatives. We're currently at an inflection point where we are deciding if we want to continue to bootstrap or potentially raise, again, with this idea of really being able to market, support retailers, get brand awareness out specifically on college campus. And so, because of our experience with Whitman Emorson, we're really comfortable and familiar with being nimble and almost taking a more grassroots approach with things. But we know that, especially as early entrants in this industry, there is a pay to play component, and we don't want, time to be the thing that prevents us from launching in a really meaningful way. So this is sort of the moment where we are, and, I think with our work with Dream Ventures, we're learning more about the process. We're trying to understand the climate, which has, 2024 is a much different climate than it was even early 2023. So we're trying to really understand all of these factors and decide what is the right step for us in the next year.
What are some of I love how there's a lot of opportunities, like from the conversation, it seems like from the health and beauty space. And you mentioned like college campuses. I'm sure in the past, condom companies are not targeting like sororities or something, it just would seem odd. But are there any other opportunities that you see that are underutilized? I don't know why my mind goes to do people get like celebrities endorsing these type of products?
For sure. I mean, the celebrity game is even different from 5 years ago in terms of products. Like celebrities are constantly launching their own CPG things right now. So there's very structured ways in general that celebrities will work with brands. But certainly, we have a partnership in Canada with CanFAR, which is like the National AIDS Organization. They're youth arm sex fluent. So we have a national partnership with them. So there's ways, we really are doing so much work in the nonprofit space. Similarly, we work with CICUS in the US. So that's one way that, more well-known people would want to get involved and, push the good message along. Yeah, and it's important. It's important for people to identify that we've tried to give platforms really to people in this space that have not had a platform before to be able to kind of reach out to their audiences and speak about why this is important.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense. That partnerships in general seem like it's a big opportunity, and also with nonprofits, especially with kind of your mission and brand and what it stands for. First of all, I've one last question. I just want to say thanks for sharing your journey, and everyone can check out whitmanemorson.com to learn more. They can check out gemsforall.com to learn more. My last question is just about lessons learned. You know, we talked about mentors, we talked about dream ventures. What's it could be lessons with someone from Dream Ventures or a different mentor. What's one of the lessons learned maybe from each of you from that end?
I mean, I think something that has been pressed upon us recently, which is sort of, cueing to what Yasemin was speaking about whether to bootstrap or can raise, is this idea that, there's this idea of hyper growth that's really come in with the tech industry in the last 15 years. And this need for companies to accelerate their growth to these massive, huge companies and to take on all this debt. And then there's kind of this opposite side, which is the way businesses have been running for over 100 years, which is just kind of incrementally grow and be profitable. And I think some of the advice that we've gotten lately is, make sure your business is solid, make sure it's really efficient in this climate. And I think that's kind of the angle that we're leaning to, and not that the ambitions aren't to grow it, but to really do this in an efficient way. I think that's some of the best advice that we've been hearing lately.
I think what comes to mind for me is, I think as founders that stumbled upon being founders, because we didn't, as you sort of put earlier, we didn't approach this in, I think, some ways that typical founders might approach it. I think what we're learning from our mentors, to speaking with other female founders at Dream Ventures, is building up, is sort of overcoming this idea of imposter syndrome and building up the confidence to speak, to command, to celebrate your wins, to command sort of the attention of investors in a way that I think is personally not a comfort zone, but something that I'm becoming more and more comfortable with. And, I think I heard somebody refer to it as the ultimate sales job to be a founder, because you look at different companies with different valuations, and the only thing that's different is how a founder has been able to pitch their idea. And so that really is something that we're working on, that we're excited, to hone a little bit. And also, like Whitney said, change this horrifying stat of female founders and venture capital.
Well, I just want to be the first one to thank both of you. Everyone, check out the website, check out more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, Whitney. Thanks,
so
Yasemin.
much.
Thanks so much.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.